We get to start a new parak. Narash and Ispatita. This is the fourth parak of Kesubos. It starts on page 41b. I thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. In the source of our learning, we should have the basic English immediately. Okay, the Mishnah starts off the topic we're familiar with already from the last parak. Narash and Ispatita, that's a young girl that's been seduced. And seduced means that she consented to this, but she's still underage. So really the money the fine should go to the father, because the power of selling her off in the marriage belongs to the father. So it says, Baishto Pagamo Knasa, her embarrassment from this seduction, and the Pagam, her decrease of value, and Uknasa, and there's also a fine, 50 silver coins that the fellow has to pay to her father. Shalavia belongs to the father. It's no chiddush so far. I mean, we knew all of that. Vahatsar, and also there's pain. Vitfusa by if she's grabbed. Tfusa is if she's raped. That's a pasuk term. Vitafsa v'shachbim, if he grabs her and he lay with her. So it switches from Hebrew to Aramaic. From the biblical Hebrew, it's vitafsa with the shin. Mishnaic Hebrew, it's vitafsa with the samach. Tafas. It switches from shin to samach. Okay, so the same thing applies, that it goes to the father. The badin. Okay, they have the court case. And the father's still alive. Then the rule is, the money is going to go to the father. Mesav, let's say the father dies after the court case, but the money wasn't collected yet. So, because the father already sort of inherited that money, not the father didn't inherit, the father was already ready to collect that money. So that money goes to the sons as an inheritance. Let's say that the father dies before the court case. Okay, Sahari and Shalatzma, it doesn't go to the sons, it goes to her. It goes to her. Doesn't go to, well, of course it doesn't go to the father because he's not alive. But maybe it should go to the brothers. But it doesn't. It goes directly to her. The same thing will apply if the court case takes place and she's still a Nara. She's still in between 12 and 12 and a half. So, Harihin Shalav belongs to the father. It says you give the money to the father of the girl, of the Nara. Mesav, and then if the father dies, Harihin Shalachim, it goes to the brothers. But what's going to be, let's say the court case doesn't take place until she's already over 12 and a half. Over there, it doesn't say you give it to the father of the Bageras. It says you give to the father of the Nara. So the rule is, Harihin Shalatzma. It's going to go to her. Because she already reached maturity before the court case. Reb Shimon argues on the point of the Mishnah that says that if the court case took place and then the father passed away, that the money goes to the brothers as their inheritance from the father. Reb Shimon says that there is no money here that's going to the brothers because it was never collected yet. And because it's a fine, it's not like a debt. The sons of the deceased inherit the debts, both the obligations to pay and the money that's coming in from the estate, from the father. But over here, until it's actually paid, because it's a fine, it's not considered a debt that they're going to inherit. That it's the rights to a money. But it's a potential rights to money. That's what it is. And according to Reb Shimon, until it's actually collected, it's nothing. You see, to look at it like this, just simplify it. If someone owes someone money, Reuben owes Shimon money and Shimon passes away, so the sons have the rights to that money. Reuben owes the father money and they can collect it. That's an obligation that doesn't have nothing to do with the court. The court just enforces it, or the court just decides how to enforce it, those things. When it comes to a knas, there is no obligation of the knas until they end up in court. The court creates the obligation. It's not a debt. It's so the court case here is very significant. Even according to the Chachamim, the court cases. Question is, what about the collection of that? That's the Machlekes Reb Shimon. If it's the collection that creates it, or if it's the psak that creates it. Well, Harein Shalatzma. What about Maisi Adel Mitziyah? So let's say when there's a rule that the work that she does, the income that she gets, goes to the father because the father provides for her. So if she has income that comes in, or if she finds objects, even if she didn't collect the income that from her work, Mesa'av, but the father passed away, and the money doesn't go to her, it goes to the brothers, because that's a real debt that belongs to the father. That's actual payment for real items, for a real service that belongs to the father. He passes away, it goes to the brother. It's not a fine. Heirs, yeah. The brothers of her, which mean the father's sons. Yeah. Her brothers, which means the father's sons. Yeah. Okay, the Gemara starts off with my kamashmal and Tanina. What are you telling me? What's this Mishnah telling me? I have another Mishnah that says exactly the same thing. It says Hamafata Leisin Shleisha Dvarim. Someone that seduces a girl that's under 12 and a half has to pay 3 types of payments. 3 types of payments are the 50 coins, the embarrassment, and the deep depreciation in value. Okay. V'ha'ines, and the rapist, Arba, he has to pay 4. What's the 4th one? The pain that we said. So that's exactly what we taught in this Mishnah, and that's what that Mishnah taught. What's the chiddush of this Mishnah? Why do we need this Mishnah? The Gemara answers, La'avi, it's strictly. It's necessary to say that it goes to the father. That Mishnah over there just says that the rapist and the seducer has to pay. We didn't say who it goes to. Now we say the recipient of that is the father. That's an important point. Gemara says, La'avi anami pshita. Obviously, it goes to the father. I'll prove it to you. Just from that line itself, it says, Midika yav mefata. The fact that this one that seduces has to pay. Obviously, it means it's going to the father. Di'ila atzma. If the money would go to her, amayav, why would he have to pay? Mifata midaita of it. Mifata, someone that seduces a girl, she did it on her own. Obviously, there was consent. That's what seducing means. It was consent. Now, if there's consent, but the money belongs to the father, then her consent doesn't absolve him from paying, because she consents, but the money belongs to the father, so she can't be meichel. She can't forgive that money. But if the money goes to her and she consents, so of course she's forgiving the money. So the fact that there's any payment there means that the money goes to the father. That's why you're telling me our Mishnah, the Chiddush, is that the money goes to the father. The fact that a mafata ever has to pay means that the money goes to the father, because she consented. If it was going to her, then she forgave that money. The Gemara answers, you're right, but amda medin it's striichalei. What we're talking about here, the chiddush of our Mishnah, is, let's say they came to court and the court said that he has to pay, but the collection didn't take place until the father passed away, and that's a pluk to the Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan. That becomes a machlekes between Reb Shimon and Rabbanan that we didn't know from before. That's a very important point that our Mishnah introduces, that if the collection didn't take place and the father passed away, does it now go to the daughter, or does it go to the heirs of the father, which means her brothers? Okay. Tanan Hassan. We learned in a Mishnah in Shavuos. It says, if someone claims to another person, he tells them, Anasta upatisa espiti. You raped or you seduced my daughter. It means you have an obligation, you owe me money, right? He says, I didn't do that, I didn't do this or that, I didn't rape or seduce her. Mashbiachani. So the fellow says, well, swear to me that you're saying the truth. Now, that swear that he's about to make He's administering an oath to him. That oath is going to exempt him from money because there's monetary obligations there. If he takes the oath and he's lying, then he's going to have to bring a sacrifice called the asham, a guilt offering that's brought for a denying of money. Well, he says, I take the oath. Now, the truth is that, let's say he didn't take the oath. Let's say he just admitted. Would he be obligated to pay? So the rule is that if someone admits to something that's a fine, that's a knas, it's not a real obligation, it's just a penalty. He admits to owing a penalty, so then he's exempt from that penalty. Now, we don't have witnesses here. We just have the father's claim to this guy. So when he admits, that's the sole source of him having this obligation is his own admitting. So the question now is, when he swore falsely, was he really denying money? Because if he would have admitted, he wouldn't have had to pay. Now that he swore falsely, and now that he's admitting, does he now have to bring the sacrifice? Let's take a look. And then he admits that he swore falsely. So the Tanakama holds that he's chayav, that he has to pay. He has to pay the principal payment. Those are 3 or 4 payments, right? Depending on if it's a rape or seducer. He has to bring an extra 5th for the money that he denied, that he lied about when he swore. And he also has to bring an asham when someone takes a false oath. He has to bring a korban. Sham Gazelis. Yeah. Okay. Reb Shimon Paiter. Reb Shimon exempts him. Sheina Mashalim Knas al Piatzmer. Shimon says, even if he would have admitted, he would have been exempt. Now that he swore falsely, what was he denying here? If he would have admitted, he would have been exempt. So swearing falsely, he's not denying money because he wouldn't have had to pay the money if he admitted. Because there are no witnesses. Yeah. What do the Chachamim hold? Amrullah, the Chacham say, but 1 second. You're right about the knas, the 50 silver, the 50 shkalim, 50 coins that have to be paid to the father of the girl. But what about the embarrassment and the depreciation of her value that after she was raped or seduced? So that is a real monetary obligation. That's not just a penalty. So that if he would have admitted those, he would have had to pay. Gemara at the end is going to tell us that the real machlekes here between Reb Shimon and Tanakama is when the father comes to the guy and says that you owe me money because you raped or seduced this girl. So what is he really claiming? Is he claiming the knas or is he claiming the Baishzu Pagam? So according to the Tanakama, he's not claiming the penalty money. He's claiming the actual obligation money, the loss over here. And according to Reb Shimon, what he's really claiming, what his intention was to claim the knas. And therefore the oath, what's the oath referring to? Yeah, you have 2 categories that are going on here, and which one was the person's emphasis when he made that claim? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I guess everyone's agreeing that he wants everything. Question is, what is he coming to court for as his first claim, and then what does he want to tag onto it to get? He wants to get everything, but what's the real claim, and what is he tagging on? right? Okay. Boy mine Abaya mi Rabba. Abaya asks Rabba. Rabba is the teacher of Abaya, and he asks Rabba. This is Rabba Bar Nachmani. He asks him the following question. At the end of this Gemara, Rabba is actually gonna. After Rabbi gives an answer, Rabbi's going to admit that the answer wasn't perfect, and it was partially correct, not 100%. It's like a historical piece of Gemara. This question goes like this: if someone tells his friend, "Anasta upatisa espiti," chaver doesn't mean his friend. Friend, it means another fellow, right? Shar she'al al gabi chaveri. An ox that goes on its friend doesn't mean he has a friend. It means another ox. So over here, it means he tells a person, "You raped or you seduced my daughter, and I already brought you to court, and you already found guilty. So just hand over the money already. I mean, we're how long do I have to wait?" And the fellow replies, "I don't know what you're talking about. I never raped. I never seduced. I wasn't even in court. I was never obligated to pay you anything." Call that lahadam. That's an abbreviation for loy hayu dvarim mi'olam. I don't know what you're talking about. You know what my name is? You got the right guy. Okay, so however, v'nishba, but then he swore, v'haida, and then he admitted that he swore falsely. He did have the right guy. Well, now the question is, Reb Shimon Mai, what's going to be the halacha according to Reb Shimon? Spells it out. Remember, Reb Shimon in the Mishnah, he said that the collection of the fine was really the whole fine. It wasn't just the verdict in court. Tanakama said that until there's a court psak, there's no fine, and therefore, if the father passes away, the heirs don't inherit it because the court never passed it. It's not a real debt until it's actually imposed on by the court. Reb Shimon said even more than that. Reb Shimon said until it's actually collected, it's not considered real money. Well, what's going to be over here? He spells it out. He says, "Kivan damad bedin." Maybe once there was a court case. It's considered money. It's really not going back to the Mishnah. It's going back to the Mishnah that the Gemara quoted, not our Mishnah. In the Mishnah that the Gemara quoted, it's more direct. It's false, right? So the Mishnah that the Gemara quoted from Shavuos was where the person claimed to another guy. He says that you owe me money because you raped or seduced my daughter, and the guy says, "No, it's not true." And then he says, makes him swear, and the person swears falsely, and then he admits that he swore falsely. So the Tanakhama said that he has to pay everything that's imposed on him by swearing falsely. That means there's an extra fifth, and there's also a sacrifice. He has all of that. And Reb Shimon said no, because if he would have admitted, he would have been exempt. So the oath was not concerning money. Because if he would have said, "Okay, I agree," so then Maida Biknas, the rule is someone that admits to a penalty doesn't have to pay. When does a penalty come? Only if witnesses tell us that he has to pay. But here it's just one against one. He could have continued denying it. He would have been exempt. So at any point that he admits, that's all. The obligation is only because of his admitting, and that doesn't create an obligation to a penalty. Someone admitting. So now, what happened if he was actually obligated once in court to pay because they found him guilty, and then now he's denying it now? So do we say, and then he swears about that prior court case? Do we say that we're still dealing with the penalty, and when he admits now he's being moided to a penalty, or do we say that because the court paskined on it, it now turns into money, and he's not admitting to a penalty, he's admitting to money? He swore falsely about money, and he's admitting to money because there was already an obligation. Does it switch from a penalty to something that's already owed? Okay, because of the the prior court case about this, and that he was found guilty. Well, do we say that because there was already a court case, so then this already becomes actual money, a real debt, and he owes that money. And then when he swore about it falsely, he was denying actual money. What does that mean? That he has to bring a sacrifice now. Or do we say that even though he was in court, but the basis of this is still all a fine, it's all a penalty, and that penalty never has to, and it will never have the korban that's associated with it. Amalei, Rabba responds, it's considered an actual money, and he has to bring the sacrifice. Well, it's for the fine, for the false. He's bringing a sacrifice, which is about, he swore about owing a penalty that was already paskined on him in court, that he owes it. The question is, if it's because the basis of this was all a penalty, does he have to bring that korban, or do we say that no, it switches over from penalty to a monetary obligation once the court passed it? So Rabbi answered that it becomes a regular monetary obligation once the court passed it. Okay. There's a little bit of a problem here, because he was asking only according to Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon in the Mishnah, if you remember, said that the court paskening does not make it into a monetary obligation. The Gemara is going to ask that later. Eisvei, Gemara has a question. Reb Shimon Aimer quotes a brisa from somewhere. Yachal starts off with the words, I may think. Yachal means it's possible. And it's going to end with, is it possible? That is like a long run-on sentence. I may think the following, that someone tells his friend, Anastar Patisia Spiti, you raped or you seduced my daughter. He says, no, I didn't do any of that. Next case. Hey, Mesharchesh es Avdi, your ox killed my slave. Now there's a obligation. If an ox kills a slave, that the owner of the ox has to pay 30 coins. That's a penalty. He didn't watch his ox well, and there's a penalty. That doesn't have to do with the value of the slave. It's a knas, 30 coins. He says, no, it didn't. Let's say the slave tells the master, you knocked out my tooth, you blinded my eye. Now, the rule is that if the master knocks out the tooth of the slave or blinds his eye, it makes him blind, the slave goes free. He says, I never knocked out your tooth, I never made you blind. This is the master denying to the servant, to the slave. Binishba, in all of these three cases, he swears that he doesn't owe. Okay, so he denies the obligation. Those are three cases of not a real monetary thing, just a halachic fine that comes on him. And then he admits that he swore falsely. Okay, now we conclude the statement. Maybe we should say he should be obligated to pay to bring the sacrifice, the korban. Talmud Laimar, the pasuk says, that korban comes if someone denies his friend the pikadon, if there was a deposit that was given to him, and he denies it and he swears about it, or he took some other oath, or with something that he stole, or he oppressed his fellow, some other sort of withholding payment, I think, withholding wages, or he had found the lost object, and he denies that he has it, and he swore falsely. So it says that he has to bring the asham, the guilt offer. So and we just looked through this whole list that the pasuk tells me about the korban. And all of those are none of them are penalties. They're all real obligations. It's someone's wages. It's he stole. It was a deposit. It was an object that he was supposed to return. All of those are actual money. It's excluding any of the other things that are knas. What's a knas? Knas would be the rape or the seduction of the girl, the death of the slave by the ox, that was the 30 coins. And I guess also the blinding of the eye is also considered a knas. That he should go free automatically just because he blinded his eye. I mean, if he would have, the slave is owned by the master. You don't have any animals that go free if the master blinds the eye of his donkey, right? Doesn't go free. So why does the slave go free? It's a regular property, right? It's not politically correct. That's all Gemara, but it's in those days a slave was his property. So, but if he blinds him, why does he go free? So it's because the Torah says so. So it's a fine. That's a penalty. Okay, so my love. Yeah, they talk about yeah, right, and that's really what we're doing here as well. There is a fixed over here. The slave goes free. That's like he gets his value, no matter what his value is. Oh, that's not really fixed, but it is. Yeah, if it's 30 coins, if it's 50 coins, that's a knas. You're right. And with the slave going free, it's not really fixed because he may have different values. But
fixed punishment.
It's a fixed punishment. Right.
Two? Even at two?
Yeah.
So right. One is really essential, although in the land of the blind, that guy is going to be really valuable. But the tooth, you knock his tooth out.
Yeah.
It's a small deal and a big
penalty. Right. Some people they claim about like the Torah allows for slavery and things, it's like, but the Torah is telling us how to treat slaves when there is slavery. The Torah is not telling us to have slaves. When there's slavery, if a person knocks out a tooth, the slave goes free.
One of the features, real properties. You can just
you can do whatever you want, right?
Yeah, but it's human property.
Right.
And
by a Jewish slave, it's much worse. Even you can't even give him a worse pillow than you have. You know what I'm saying? You have to give him the best of the best, so that's very difficult. Okay, now what were we talking about over here? We said my love. It must be that we're talking about b'shamad b'din. That there was already a court case. This is the way that we're creating, Abaya is creating a question on Rabbah. The way he creates that question is by quoting something and making an assumption about it. Now, based on that assumption, he has a question on Rabbah. The assumption goes like, Rabbah said that once there's a court case, the penalty turns into money. It's not a penalty anymore. It's regular money. And if he takes an oath about it, so then he has to bring the sacrifice that's for false oath. Now we have a case where he doesn't have to bring a sacrifice for a false oath. Now, okay, fine. Maybe that's before the court case. Abaya says, my love, b'shamad b'din. No, it must be talking about that. It's after the court case. And you see, even after the court case, he doesn't need to bring the sacrifice. He denied it and he swore about it, and it doesn't turn into money. Rabbah, what are you telling me that it turns into money? It turns into an obligation because it was already stood in court. You see, he's exempt if he stood in court. Gemara says, no, it's talking about where he wasn't in court. They never went to court yet. There's a regular penalty. He's denying that he committed the act, and so therefore he's exempt from the penalty. The Gemara says, 1 second. Since if you look at the beginning of this brisa, it was talking about where they were in court. So Seifanami b'shamad b'din. Probably that brisa is going to be symmetrical, right? And the way that it starts off at the beginning, that's the way that's going to follow through in one line through the whole brisa. If the beginning of the brisa started off where there was already a court case, then the end of the brisa is probably also where there was a court case. Diktani Reisha, because if we go back to the beginning, it says, we didn't learn this before. I only know things that he has to pay the principal, that there's a sacrifice. How do we know that he has to bring the sacrifice and pay the extra fifth by things that are a penalty? For example, a double payment of a theft, or the 4 or 5 times if it was an ox or a lamb, or the einus and mefata mitzi shemra, that the rapist and the seducer and the one that claims that she wasn't a virgin after he married her. How do you know that he also has to bring the sacrifice? It's going against everything that we know, right? So Talmud Laimar umalamal riba. It says that he commits a trespass. So that's an inclusion that there's other cases also that he has to bring the sacrifice. The Gemara says, "Hey chidami, what's the case? If he didn't go to court, would there be kefel? If he admits to stealing and there was never a court case, he's exempt from the kefel. He approaches the owner and says, "I took this from you.
Yeah.
Here, I'm giving it back." He doesn't have to pay a double penalty, a double payment. It must be that they went to, that there was a court case. Okay.
Does he have any penalty? The thief that admits it in transit,
I don't think so.
just.
Yeah, if there's no witnesses, he just gives it back.
Why would you give it back?
He has a guilty conscience.
Yeah. And when he gives it back, he's totally forgiven. It's as if nothing happened.
Yeah, that's what it seems. Unless there were witnesses, then he would get.
Then he gets.
I don't think he get lashes for stealing because it says v'heshav esagzela. I think it's a lavanitic lash. I don't think there's lashes for that. I think it says give it back. That's what.
Okay.
But then he would have to pay double if it was Geneva. If he stole it and secretly, he has to pay double. If he stole it outright, just grabbed it and ran, then he doesn't have to pay double.
If he stole it in secret and gives it back, he pays double.
If there were witnesses, then yeah.
Oh, the witness. No witnesses. It's just.
Right.
Wow. Funny religion.
I'm not able to answer that.
I mean, it seems the thief is really,
It's worse.
no, the thief who steals and returns it is an honorable man.
Right. Yeah.
Instead of finding them for returning it, God would caught you. So you turn yourself in, you still get 10 years in jail. Turn yourself in.
Right. Midaresha b'shamad b'din. Since obviously this first part was obviously talking about where there was already a court case and he was found guilty and it becomes a monetary payment. So then seifanami b'shamad b'din. Then the end of it also must be where it was he stood in court. Now, if that's the case, that's what Abaya was asking Rabbah. He says, if he was already in court and they told him that you owe the money, and then he denies it and he swears falsely and then he admits. The pasuk tells us, "V'kichesh bam," you say that he does not need to bring the sacrifice. Why did Rabbah say that if there was a court case, he would need to bring the sacrifice if he swore about it, that he denied that there was a court case and he was obligated? We have a clear brisa that says that you don't have to. Well, I'm not 100% sure why we needed the second part of the brisa. It seems like from the first part of the brisa would be enough. All of this was like basing it on the second part of the brisa. Oh, the Seifa is also Amad Badin, but the Reisha tells me everything that I needed to know. The Reisha tells me that he was Amad Badin, stood in court, was found guilty, then he denies it. He has to bring the sacrifice. That's exactly what we were asking. Okay, whatever the case is, Amalei, the Rabbi answers, Yechilna l'shnuyelach. If you want, I could answer you, Reisha b'shamad badin, the Seifa b'shlay amad badin. and V'kula Reb Shimoni. And I can tell you that the whole Bryce is really Reb Shimon. And the first part is talking about where there was a court case, and that's why he's I don't know how he gets out of that. Once he says that there was a court case, and that's why he's chayav the carbon, and that's a clear contradiction to Rabbah. I don't know how he explains the Reisha. But Seifa, Seifa b'shlayam ad b'din. The Seifa is when he wasn't in court. V'kula Reb Shimoni. However, I don't want to give you pushed, squeezed in answers that aren't really
Translates that as a
far-fetched answer.
That means like,
Yeah.
crazy.
Tim Kane, because if that's the case, if it was the way that I would answer you, then you would tell me, Amritli, the Bach adds in, then the Reisha should have said, listen, Reisha Reb Shimon Aimer, should have said at the beginning Reb Shimon Aimer, listen, Seifa, Div Reb Shimon, or say at the end that this is the words of Reb Shimon. What really happened is, it starts at the beginning Reb Shimon Aimer. No, it starts in the middle of the Bryce. It says Reb Shimon Aimer. It doesn't start at the beginning Reb Shimon Aimer. Well, rather, it must be that all of them was, you're right, that it was in court. Reish Rabbanan v'Sefer Reb Shimon. The end is the Rabbanan and the Sefer is Reb Shimon.
Oh.
And if that's the case, that the Sefer is Reb Shimon, and Medina Lachlin in Karban Shvua, the Rachmana Patrim Yebekichesh. You're right about the Karban. Rabbah now admits to Abaya. You're right about bringing the Karban. That even if there was a court case, it's not even if there was a court case. If there was a court case, and regarding, even if it started off with a fine, started off with a penalty, but because there was already a court case in the court paskin that he's obligated to pay, afterwards, if he ever denies it, it's not considered that he's denying a fine, it's considered that he's denying money, and he has to bring the sacrifice. Opposite. The opposite. No, he's going back and he's saying, you're right about the Brisa. He says, even if there was a court case, that's how it was. Even if there was a court case. But because it initially started as a fine, he's exempt from bringing the sacrifice because it started off as a fine. Where do we know that from? From the pasuk of Akichesh. It says that if he denies to his friend, and he has a bunch of these items, that what does he deny? The deposit or the stolen or the withhold wages or all of those things. So then he has to bring the sacrifice. But all of those are monetary payments. Those are not fines. Those are not penalties. If it started off as a penalty, he'd be exempt from that. Even though it afterwards turned into a court case and there was a psak, it still always remains on that status of that it was initially, that it's a penalty and he doesn't have to bring the sacrifice. So when I said that it was money, that's Leirisha Labanav, that's talking about that the sons should inherit it. Okay, now he's getting into trouble. Because what happens right now is his statement now that he's saying, remember I told you that after there's a court case, then it's considered that it's that it's money and that the sons can inherit it. So that's the view of Reb Shimon. That's what Rab is saying. The problem is, Abai asks him a question. Reb Shimon Aimer, Imlei Hispik Ligvei Sachemei Sa'av Harein Shalatzma. Doesn't say that. Our Mishnah says that if there was a court case, but it was never collected, and then the father passed away, Reb Shimon's view is that the money does not go to the heirs, the money goes to the girl. Because even though there was a court case, that does not turn it into a real money. It still remains a penalty, and until the penalty is collected, according to him, it's not considered money. Contradicts even what Rabbah admitted to. It contradicts. So basically, Rabbah had to get out of saying that he brings the sacrifice, And now Rabbah said that, but at least what I'm telling you is that it belongs to the heirs. Turns out it doesn't belong to the heirs either.
Sherman sees the court. And a way to enforce the penalty that doesn't change.
Right.
That would be changed.
Right. I mean, the other, there's another way of learning it. And that is that the truth is that everyone agrees that it becomes money after the court case, it becomes a real obligation like that. However, there is a pasuk that teaches me that if the initial part of that obligation, right, it's easier just to say that, well, does it turn into money or not? But there may be one more way of looking at it, and that is that after the court case, do I still have to retain its initial obligation, which was a penalty, and therefore the sacrifice will never be applied to it. Rashi seems to say it like that. Okay, but let's see over here. The Amrit Maman Havi, if you say that it's money, Lairisha Labanov, it should go to the sons, Latzma Mai, the Achen Boy Mehavi, should go to the brothers. The Amrit Maman Havi, Lairisha Labanov, Latzma Mai, why does it go to her? The Achen Boy Mehavi, should go to the brothers. Okay. Amar Rava comes in and comments about this discussion. He says, Hi Milsa Kashoy, but Rabba v'Rab Yosef Esrin v'Tartin Shnin. Rabba and Rab Yosef had a difficulty with this question for 22 years. It turns out that Rabba was the Rosh Hashiva for 22 years, and when he passed away, Rab Yosef took over, and he lived another 2 years after that. Rab Yosef, Rashi adds in that he had help from heaven to answer this question, because really Rabba was sharper than Rab Yosef. He wasn't able to answer. Rab Yosef was had a great memory. He knew everything. Now at a certain point he forgot it, but and Abaye would always remind him. Remember that? But here Rab Yosef takes over the yeshiva. It's 2 years in the yeshiva, and he answers it. Shani Hassam, over there it's different. Damarkrav and Nasani Isha Sheikhev Imala Vianar Chamishan Kesef, that the man gives to the father, that the man that lay with her gives to the father of the girl 50 coins. It only belongs to the father once it's given, not once the court obligates it. When does Rabba say that it belongs to the inheritors, the heirs? That's by the other types of fines. If that's the case, the Gemara says, 30 coins that the owner of the ox has to pay to the master of the slave. It says yitin la'adainav, just like it says v'nasan la'avia anara. Here it says yitin la'adainav. Same thing. Why does he have to give the money to the heirs? It should not be considered anything if the father wasn't there, right? He only gives it to the father. Yitin l'chud v'nasan l'chud. It gives me a very interesting. There's two ways of giving a future tense in Hebrew. One is you say yitain, he shall pay. Other one is that I take a past tense of nasan, he gave, and I add a vav at the beginning of it, and it turns into and he shall give. So the past tense that's turned into, what do you call that vav? The vav ahipa? Conversive, I think they call it. So that turns it into a future tense is different. Arguma is telling me is different than when it's a straight future tense. See, both of these are really like the historical future, right? It's not a future tense. It's not happening in the future. It's after that story happened. So we say that he shall pay. In the past, this was the future. So he shall pay to the father. But there's two that he shall pays. One is he paid, right? Another one is a direct he shall pay. So the Gemara is telling me that that's a difference. Ihachi, if that's the case, why in the Bryce, if your whole idea over here is from the word vinasan, which is really a past tense, which means that the whole thing is just only when he pays it. That's when it becomes the father's, but not beforehand, and then it's not considered money. So why, when we quoted the pasuk to tell me that there's no obligation over here of the sacrifice, did we say that v'kichesh, when he denies it, we have a better pasuk to bring? Yeah, the pasuk should say v'nasan. V'nasan is Talmud Leimer v'nasan mi boile. It should have said v'nasan. Yeah. Amarava kiyitzrik v'kichesh kain shamda badin bagra umesa. The word the pasuk v'kichesh is telling us this halacha, that let's say they went to court, and after the court case, she reached maturity. So now the money's supposed to go to her. However, then she dies. Not the father dies. We were talking about the whole time the father dies. Da'asam kika yaris avia minadideka yaris. Because now the father is actually inheriting it from her. Now, if that's the case, then I would say that maybe if the guy denies it now and he still doesn't pay, maybe now he should have to, here it's not v'nasan lavianara. We don't have the pasuk of v'nasan anymore. You're not giving it to the father, you're giving it to the girl. But the father's inheriting from the girl. So I would say that the father now has to bring the sacrifice not the father, the guy that's denying it now to the father, the rapist, has to bring the sacrifice if he denies it. The Kichish tells me that he doesn't have to bring the sacrifice even in that case. Yihachi yatsuelu shem knas mamanu. What are you telling me that these are not that these are a knas? We're talking about that it was already in court. They're not a knas. Once it's in court, it's considered mammon. What we really mean to say is that the basis of this is a knas. Even, you see, obviously the Gemara is accepting that once it goes to court, it becomes money. The basis of this is a knas, and therefore there's an exemption when it comes to that sacrifice. Okay. Wanted to get to them, but let's leave it over here. Back to Esrei.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day. You too.